Hello and welcome back to Parc Fermé Parlay with Kieran Downey. It's race week once again. Like buses, we wait so long for one and then two come at once, eh? We're heading off to China this week for the second round of the 2025 season, and it is also the first sprint race of the year. And I have to say, whoever decided the schedule for the sprint races this year is ruthless, because China is a tricky circuit that we've only been to once in the past 6 years. So there is still just an element of the unknown for the teams because so much has changed since we were there before last year. We've ran on it once. We've got full track resurfacing this year, which sometimes throws problems in the air for the teams and makes it a little bit tricky for the drivers. As I said, it's a demanding circuit. They only have one practice session and then it is straight into qualifying and sprint and then qualifying and then the Grand Prix. There is no big amount of time to really learn the track and find the right setups. It's all going to happen very, very quickly. For the rookies, I feel especially bad for them because their first time in Formula One machinery competitively was obviously last week in Australia, and the weather was mental and 4 out of 5 of them crashed out. So it is, I think, going to be quite an interesting weekend for the drivers. Now, as always, we're here to get into our predictions for the sprint and for the Grand Prix. So let's kick things off with sprint pole. I'm going Lando Norris, and I'm going with Lando Norris for two simple reasons. One, he has very good qualifying pace, and two, he is in the fastest car. Now, I know he made a very big deal last week about trying to get everyone to stop talking about just how fast the car is and, you know, how he is a very good driver and Oscar's a very good driver. They ran very good races and it's not all about the car. But them having the fastest car by a fair bit compared to the rest of the pack is definitely not something that can be overlooked. And I think it is going to benefit them massively this weekend. As I said, Lando's qualifying pace is very good. I think compared to his teammate, he probably has a bit of an edge on qualifying, but I don't think there'll be massive amounts between them as teammates. And actually, quite a lot of the pack, if we looked at qualifying last week, there was nothing in it. So I do think it's going to be incredibly tight, but I do think Lando Norris is just going to have that little bit of an edge. Now, for the win, for the sprint win, I'm also going Lando Norris. For pretty much the same reasons as why I've picked him for quali pole. This is an all-out sprint to the checkered flag. There's no pit stops, there's nothing like that to think of. It is start your engines, lights out, and you are just hell for leather to the checkered flag. And I do think that, again, they have the fastest car. He is an exceptional driver. I see no reason why Lando Norris shouldn't be getting a sprint pole and a sprint win. In saying all of this, there is a lot of talk at the moment about the rear wing flexibility of some of the cars. And McLaren has sort of been at the forefront of this conversation of the sort of Mini DRS since Azerbaijan last year. Now, the Mini DRS, that was sort of coined after the observations of the flexing in the rear wing of the McLaren of Oscar Piastri at last year's Azerbaijan Grand Prix. The teams argued its validity. Red Bull were sort of leading that charge, and the FIA got involved. They went and did an inspection. I believe that the car was actually deemed to be legal. McLaren then, it was a rear wing specification that they were only going to use once after Azerbaijan in Vegas, but they decided just to not use it at all. Some say that is why McLaren's performance in Vegas last year wasn't what we expected it to be. However, we'll probably never know because they never actually ran that rear wing. Now, the FIA imposed stricter guidelines at the start of the season to limit the rear wing flexibility. And there was some observations made by the FIA at the Australian Grand Prix last week that confirmed that all the teams had complied with those regulations. That being said, there is still a lot of debate raging on that some of the teams are still benefiting too much from rear wing flexibility. And upon a review, the FIA has released a statement that further restrictions will be effective immediate from this weekend. Now, the original guidelines from the FIA stated that the teams could have a gap in the rear wing of 2 millimeters. They have reduced that to half a millimeter, 0.5. Do I think McLaren was getting a benefit from this Mini DRS, as it's been coined? Yes. Do I think it was significant? No. If this reduction of 1.5 millimeters equates to half a second a lap, then yes, it will massively disadvantage McLaren. However, I don't think it does, so I don't think it's going to affect McLaren that much. They still have the fastest car. I don't think it's going to disadvantage them. I don't think it's suddenly going to slow their car down so much. I genuinely believe that they just have an all-round faster car, and I am quite happy to lock in a Lando Norris sprint pole and a Lando Norris sprint win. Now, moving on to the Grand Prix, and for pole position, I'm going to go Lando Norris. This is going to be really boring. I can hear you already that, oh, he's just going to go McLaren. I think it is, honestly, I think it's the smart choice. I think anything other than that might be a bit foolish. Like, I'm not going to say it's going to be Ferrari. I think the only people that you could actually say could potentially be on pole is Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, or Max Verstappen. The reason I'm not putting Max is because that car's not the fastest. However, Max Verstappen's a great qualifier, but we've seen him in Melbourne. He put in a fantastic lap, but was pipped by both McLarens. I would take Oscar Piastri out of that purely because I do think Lando is just a bit of a better qualifier. I think his one lap pace is better than Oscar's. So I'm sticking with Lando Norris. Lando Norris, pole position for the Grand Prix. Now, P3 for the race, I'm going Lando Norris. And it will make a little bit more sense when I talk about the other two, but I'm locking in Lando for a P3 in the race. I think that, not that there'll be any issues for him, I think that who I've gone for is probably a little bit better in terms of racecraft, and in fact both of them are, to be honest with you. Let's just get it, because it'll all make more sense when I begin to describe the other ones. P2 for the race, I'm going Max Verstappen. Max is a phenomenal driver, and I do think that at certain times during the Australian Grand Prix, it was very touch and go for Lando that Max was actually going to get him and get the overtake done. I think what the biggest problem was, I think Max's biggest problem was the tyres. He was losing his tyres, his rear tyres, quite significantly. China is a little bit more of a front-loaded track, so if that sort of shifts the degradation of the tyres more evenly, I think that Max could be in with a very good shot at getting Lando Norris, to be quite honest with you. Yes, he's in a tricky car and a slightly slower car, but he is inevitable, like Thanos. He is an incredible driver, and you can never actually count him out. So I'm going with another P2 for Max Verstappen, locking it in. And for P1 in the Grand Prix, I'm going with Oscar Piastri. Now, I know I said this last week and it didn't really work out, but I'm saying that it was a bit of a freak race between the weather and everything else that was going on. It was a bit crazy. I don't think the weather should be such an issue this weekend, to be honest with you. But the reason I'm going with Oscar Piastri is fairly similar to Lando. He is driving the fastest car. And the reason I've gone for Oscar instead of Lando is purely because I think Oscar's racecraft is slightly better than Lando's. Lando has the edge in that sort of one lap, all out qualifying pace. I think Oscar is doing a much better job at managing his tyres. His racecraft is exceptional, and he's in the fastest car. I don't see there being any reason why Oscar Piastri shouldn't be winning the Chinese Grand Prix, Mini DRS or no Mini DRS. So locking it in, Oscar Piastri. There we go. Now moving on to just a couple other predictions, and I'm going to kick things off with the strong one, Isaac Hadjar redemption. He's going to shut Helmut Marko up because, one, I don't know what, I shouldn't be surprised because it's Helmut Marko, but I am actually shocked when I seen the headlines and everything that Helmut Marko had said that Isaac's crash and him sort of getting emotional and teary about it was embarrassing. There is no place for that in this sport whatsoever. No place for it. This is a young guy who is 20 years old. He is doing his first Formula One Grand Prix in freak conditions, and he's crashed his car. He's obviously devastated. The emotions are running high. He cried. He let his emotions out, and I don't see there being anything wrong with that, to be quite honest with you. I don't see there being any issue with it. And the fact that somebody from within his own camp, his own team, has said that he's embarrassing is shocking to me. It's absolutely shocking. I cannot believe those words ever came out of his mouth. There is no part of expressing your emotions or anything like that that is embarrassing. And I do think Helmut Marko should be ashamed of his comments. There is no need for him to be, quite frankly, be a dick about it. And I was so glad to see everyone sort of calling Helmut Marko out. I've seen the commentators do it. Even Christian Horner has said that he felt sorry for Isaac Hadjar. It really pissed me off, and I have absolutely no time for that sort of nonsense. I'm locking in an Isaac Hadjar redemption. Not even I don't think it's a redemption. I'm just locking in that he has a great race, to be quite honest with you. I think he showed that he was pretty strong in qualifying. So I think he's got another strong qualifying coming in. And I think that he's actually going to be scoring some pretty decent points. So I'm locking it in. A decent qualifying for Isaac Hadjar. Isaac Hadjar scoring points in the Grand Prix, and a big to Helmut Marko. My next predictions are lying down at the Haas garage. And I think it's going to be another incredibly disappointing weekend for them. They, by and large, I think, have the slowest car. And I don't think they've worked it out. I don't think they understand it. And they are incredibly off the pace. So I'm thinking it's going to be another disappointing weekend, sort of chilling at the back of the grid. Like, they got lapped incredibly early in Australia. And I just don't see them making any massive improvements by the time we get to China this weekend. So I'm putting it in another disappointing weekend for Oliver Bearman and Esteban Ocon. And my final prediction is another team prediction, and I think it's going to be another fabulous weekend for Williams. I think it's going to be bloody brilliant. I think they're going to continue with a decent qualifying and a decent result across the entire weekend for both the sprint and the main race. I think we'll get some solid points on the board for Carlos Sainz. I think they won't have any, I don't think he's going to have any of the issues that seen him out of the race in Australia. I think that was a one-off. He actually said in his Instagram post after the race that he understood the issue that had saw him retire on the first lap and that it left him a lot calmer. So I don't think there's any alarm bells, and I think that they will, both of these drivers, Carlos and Alex, will go into this weekend riding a high from Australia and will be able to go in and really attack this weekend and get some solid points on the board. I think it's going to be another strong weekend for Williams. I was kind of thinking about putting a Ferrari prediction in, but I actually just don't want to depress myself. Like, until I see they're running this weekend, I will make no further predictions on Ferrari because I actually don't want to get depressed. I don't want to say they're going to be bad, but part of me thinks they might be. So I'm just going to leave them off because I don't want to upset myself. And that is our predictions for this weekend's Chinese Grand Prix. Let us know in the comments what your predictions are. I would love to hear them. And we will be back to cover all the action from this weekend. Enjoy the rest of your day. I love you. Bye.